I think I didn't do anything wrong, just needed to feel seen again. At least that's what I told myself when I let my ex stay over. But now there's a stack of legal papers on the kitchen counter, my husband's signature cold and clear, and I keep telling everyone it's not my fault. I never expected one night to end with my whole life under a lawyer's microscope. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The Egyptian cotton sheets felt different that night. Maybe it was because I knew Marcus wouldn't be back until Thursday morning, or maybe it was the third glass of wine making everything feel softer, more forgiving. I'd spent the evening scrolling through old photos on my phone, the ones from before marriage, before Ren, before everything became so predictable and cold. That's when I saw Callum's message. Thinking of you tonight, Eulalie. Remember that little cafe we used to go to? It's still there. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for what felt like hours. Marcus had barely kissed me goodbye when he left for his business trip to Chicago. Just a quick peck on the cheek while scrolling through his phone, already mentally checked out. When was the last time he really looked at me? When was the last time anyone made me feel like I mattered? I remember everything, I typed back. Want to come over? Marcus is out of town. The response came immediately. On my way. I rushed upstairs to change into the silk nightgown I'd bought months ago but never worn. Marcus would have called it impractical. I lit candles in the bedroom and opened a bottle of the expensive wine he'd been saving for some special occasion that never seemed to come. Callum arrived at 9:30, looking exactly like I remembered. That same easy smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He brought flowers, white lilies, my favorites. Marcus never remembered my favorites. You look incredible, Laylee, he said, using the nickname that always made my heart skip. Marriage suits you. We started in the living room, talking about old times, sharing the wine. He told me about his job at the marketing firm, how he'd thought about calling me so many times over the years. I found myself leaning closer, laughing at his stories, feeling alive in a way I hadn't in months. I missed this, I whispered when he brushed a strand of hair from my face. I missed feeling like someone actually sees me. Marcus doesn't appreciate what he has, Callum said, his hand trailing down my arm. He never did understand you like I do. When he kissed me, it felt like coming home. Like remembering who I used to be before I became just Marcus's wife, Ren's mother, the woman who organized carpools and packed lunches and never got a second glance. We moved upstairs naturally, inevitably. In the master bedroom, under the warm glow of the candles, Callum made me feel beautiful again, desired, important. Everything Marcus had stopped making me feel years ago. You deserve so much better than this, he whispered against my neck as we lay tangled in the sheets afterward. You deserve someone who worships you. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Marcus. Flight got moved up, landing at 11 p.m. instead of Thursday, home by midnight. My blood went cold. It was already 11:15. You have to go, I said, sitting up abruptly. Now Marcus is coming home. Callum was surprisingly calm, gathering his clothes with practiced efficiency. It's going to be okay, Laylee. We didn't do anything wrong. You're allowed to have friends over. But I was panicking, blowing out candles, stripping the bed, my hands shaking as I tried to erase any evidence of what had happened. I threw on a robe and rushed downstairs to let him out through the back door. That's when I heard Ren's bedroom door creak open. Mommy? Her small voice drifted down the hallway. Who was that man? My 7-year-old daughter stood at the top of the stairs in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She must have heard voices, or maybe the front door closing. Just a friend, sweetheart, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Go back to bed. But before she could respond, I heard Marcus's key in the front door. He walked into the living room just as Callum was slipping out the back, and I knew immediately that he'd seen him. The wine glasses on the coffee table, my flushed face, the way I was clutching my robe closed, it all painted a picture I couldn't explain away. "Who was that?" Marcus asked quietly, setting down his briefcase. His voice was eerily calm, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been shouting. "Just an old friend," I said, the lie slipping out easily. "Callum Doyle from college. He was in the neighborhood and stopped by to catch up. We were just talking." Marcus looked at the wine glasses, the flowers on the side table, then back at me. "Just talking?" "Yes, just talking. You're being paranoid, Marcus. God, I can't even have a friend over without you making it into something sinister." He stared at me for a long moment, then walked past me toward the stairs. "I'm going to check on Wren." I heard him in her room, his voice soft and gentle as he tucked her back into bed. When he came back downstairs, he grabbed a pillow and blanket from the linen closet. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," he said without looking at me. "Marcus, please. You're overreacting. Nothing happened." But he was already walking away, and something in his posture told me that everything had just changed forever. The next morning, Marcus was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, just the lingering scent of his cologne in the hallway and the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway at dawn. I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the office with my nerves this frayed. But by noon, the walls of the house were closing in on me. I needed to talk to someone, needed to hear that I wasn't the villain in this story. Tasha Yu had been my closest friend since Wren started kindergarten. We'd bonded over soccer mom duties and wine nights, and she'd always been a good listener. I called her around lunchtime. "Can you meet me at Brewster's Cafe?" I asked. "I really need to talk." She arrived 20 minutes later, sliding into the booth across from me with a concerned expression. Tasha was one of those naturally kind people who always assumed the best in everyone, which was exactly what I needed right now. "You sounded upset on the phone," she said, ordering a latte from the waitress. "What's going on?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head during the drive over, crafting the narrative carefully. "It's Marcus," I said, letting my voice crack slightly. "He's been so distant lately, so cold. Last night he came home from his business trip and completely lost it because I had an old friend over." Tasha's eyebrows rose. "An old friend?" "Callum Doyle. We dated in college, but that was over a decade ago. He's in town for work and just stopped by to catch up. We had some wine, talked about old times, completely innocent. But Marcus walked in and immediately assumed the worst." I watched Tasha's face carefully as I spoke. She was nodding sympathetically, but there was something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. "That must have been really upsetting," she said carefully. "What exactly did Marcus say?" "He barely said anything, which was almost worse. Just gave me these accusatory looks and slept in the guest room. This morning he left without even saying goodbye." I dabbed at my eyes with a napkin. "I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own marriage. I can't even have friends without him getting suspicious." "Have things been bad between you two for a while?" Tasha asked. "Honestly? Yes. He works constantly, barely talks to me when he's home, never shows any affection. I feel invisible in my own house. And now this, getting jealous over nothing." I shook my head. "I'm starting to think he's looking for excuses to be angry with me." Tasha reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Eulalie. Marriage is hard, especially with work stress and kids. Maybe you two should consider counseling. I've suggested it before, but Marcus thinks therapy is a waste of time. He's not exactly the type to open up about his feelings." We talked for another hour, and by the time we left, I felt better. Tasha had validated my feelings, agreed that Marcus was overreacting, and promised to be there if I needed to talk more. Having someone in my corner made all the difference. But when I got home, there was a message on the answering machine from my mother-in-law, Judith. Her voice was crisp and formal. "Eulalie, I need to speak with you. Please call me back as soon as possible." My stomach dropped. Marcus must have talked to his mother. I called her back immediately, trying to sound casual. "Hi, Judith. Got your message." "Eulalie." Her tone was ice cold. "I just spoke with my son. He told me about your visitor last night." "It was completely innocent," I said quickly. "Just an old friend catching up. Marcus is blowing this way out of proportion." "Is he? Because from what I understand, you had a man over to the house while your husband was away, drinking wine in the living room until nearly midnight, with my granddaughter sleeping upstairs." The judgment in her voice made my cheeks burn. "It wasn't like that. We were just talking." "Just talking," she repeated, the same way Marcus had. "Eulalie, I've been married for 35 years. I know what just talking looks like, and I know what it doesn't look like. I can't believe you're taking his side without even hearing my version of events." "I'm not taking sides. I'm looking out for my son and my granddaughter, and right now they both need protection from whatever game you're playing." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Game? I wasn't playing any game. I was just trying to find some happiness in a marriage that had become cold and lonely. My own mother called an hour later, and the contrast was immediate. "Sweetheart, I heard about your trouble with Marcus," Delphine said in her warm, sympathetic voice. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. It's just a misunderstanding that's gotten blown out of proportion." Men can be so possessive sometimes. Your father was the same way, always getting jealous over nothing. Marcus will come around once he realizes he's being silly. "I hope so. His mother was incredibly rude to me on the phone." "Well, Judith never liked you much anyway. She probably sees this as an opportunity to stir up trouble. Don't let her get in your head, honey. You know what really happened, and that's all that matters." After hanging up with my mother, I felt more balanced. At least someone believed in me. Someone understood that I wasn't the villain here. But that evening, when I tried calling Marcus, it went straight to voicemail. And when I checked our joint bank account online, I discovered that I'd been locked out. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the error message on the screen. Marcus was making moves, and I had no idea what came next. Saturday dinner at Judith's house had been a monthly tradition since Marcus and I got married. Usually, I looked forward to these gatherings. Judith was an excellent cook, and Wren loved playing with her cousins. But this week, walking up to the familiar brick colonial felt like approaching a firing squad. Marcus's car was already in the driveway, along with his sister Becca's silver Honda. I'd been hoping to arrive first, to control the narrative before anyone else could poison the well. Wren skipped ahead of me to the front door, oblivious to the tension that had been suffocating our house for the past week. She'd been quieter than usual, asking fewer questions, but 7-year-olds are resilient. I was hoping this family dinner would help restore some normalcy. Judith answered the door with a tight smile. "Eulalie, how nice of you to join us." The emphasis on nice wasn't lost on me. I followed her into the living room where Marcus sat on the couch with his sister Becca, their heads bent together in quiet conversation. They looked up when I entered, and the silence that followed was deafening. "Hi, Marcus," I said, trying to sound casual. "How was your week?" "Fine," he replied without meeting my eyes. It was the first word he'd spoken to me in 3 days. Becca stood up and gave me a stiff hug. "Eulalie, good to see you." Becca had always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found middle ground. If anyone was going to be sympathetic to my side of the story, it would be her. "Where's little Wren?" Judith asked, and I realized my daughter had already disappeared, probably to find her cousin Emma upstairs. Playing with Emma, I assume. I sat down in the armchair across from the couch, feeling like I was facing a tribunal. "Should I help you with dinner, Judith?" That won't be necessary. Everything's under control. She remained standing, arms crossed. Though I think we should clear the air before we eat. For the children's sake. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Mom, maybe we should… No, Marcus. This affects the whole family. Judith's gaze fixed on me. Eulalie, I think you owe everyone an explanation for what happened last weekend. My heart started racing. This wasn't how I'd planned for this to go. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean the man who was in your house until midnight while your husband was away. The man my granddaughter saw sneaking out the back door. Becca looked confused. Wait, what? What man? I glanced at Marcus, hoping he'd intervene, but he was staring at the floor. It was just an old friend, I said. Callum Doyle. We went to college together. He was in town for work and stopped by to catch up. Until midnight, Judith repeated, with wine and flowers. How do you know about flowers? I asked before I could stop myself. Wren mentioned them when Marcus brought her over on Wednesday. White lilies, she said. She thought they were pretty. My face burned. I'd forgotten about the flowers, forgotten that children notice everything. Becca was looking between Marcus and me with growing understanding. Oh my God. Eulalie, please tell me you didn't… I didn't do anything wrong! The words came out sharper than I'd intended. I had a friend over for a couple of hours. We talked, we had some wine, and that's it. I'm allowed to have friends. Are you? Judith asked coldly. Because from where I sit, it looks like you invited your ex-boyfriend over the moment your husband left town. Ex-boyfriend from over a decade ago, I corrected. And Marcus is being completely unreasonable about this. He's always been jealous and controlling, but this is ridiculous. The room went dead silent. Marcus finally looked up at me, and the hurt in his eyes was devastating. Controlling, he said quietly. When have I ever been controlling? You question everything I do, everywhere I go. You never trust me. And now you're turning your whole family against me over one innocent evening with an old friend. Becca stood up abruptly. Okay, I think I'm going to check on the kids. Sit down, Rebecca, Judith said firmly. This concerns all of us. Eulalie, my son has never been controlling. If anything, he's been too trusting, too accommodating. The fact that you're trying to paint him as the villain here tells me everything I need to know. I'm not painting anyone as anything. I'm just trying to explain that this whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion. Has it? Because Marcus told me you lied to him about who Callum was, said he was just a friend when he's actually your ex-boyfriend. I felt trapped. I didn't lie. He is a friend. The fact that we dated years ago doesn't change that. And the fact that you were in your nightgown when Marcus came home, was that also innocent? My mouth fell open. How did you… I looked at Marcus. You told her about my clothes? I told my mother what I saw when I walked into my own house, Marcus said, his voice steady but cold. My wife in a silk nightgown, wine glasses everywhere, flowers on the table, and a man I'd never met sneaking out the back door. He wasn't sneaking. He left through the back because it was closer to where he'd parked. Even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Judith shook her head. Eulalie, do you hear yourself? Do you understand how this looks? I understand that my husband doesn't trust me, and apparently neither does his family. I understand that I can't even have a conversation with an old friend without everyone assuming the worst. Maybe because you gave us reason to assume the worst, Becca said quietly. She'd sat back down, but she was perched on the edge of the couch like she might flee at any moment. I can't believe this. You're all ganging up on me based on assumptions and suspicions. No one is even trying to see my side of this. Your side? Judith's voice was rising. Your side is that you had your ex-boyfriend over for wine and intimacy while your husband was out of town and your daughter was sleeping upstairs. What exactly are we supposed to see? Intimacy? We talked, that's all. In your nightgown, until midnight, with flowers and wine. I was getting desperate. You know what? Maybe I did want some male attention for once. Maybe I wanted to feel like someone actually cared about me, someone who didn't take me for granted. Is that such a crime? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked like I'd slapped him. There it is, Judith said softly. The truth finally comes out. I realized too late what I'd admitted to. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant. Marcus stood up slowly. I think you've been planning this for a while. I think you invited him over knowing exactly what would happen. That's not true. Then why did you change into a nightgown? Why did you light candles in our bedroom? Why did you open the expensive wine I was saving for our anniversary? My heart stopped. How did you know about the candles? The wax drippings on the nightstand, and the sheets were in the washing machine when I got up Thursday morning. I felt the walls closing in. Every detail I'd forgotten, every piece of evidence I'd missed. It was all adding up against me. I want you to leave, Marcus said quietly. What? I want you to leave my mother's house. Now. Marcus, please, take Ren and go home. We'll talk about this later. I'm not leaving without discussing this like adults. Adults don't lie to their spouses about having affairs, Judith said coldly. It wasn't an affair. But even as I said it, I could see in their faces that no one believed me. Not Marcus, not Becca, not Judith. And maybe, deep down, I didn't believe it either. I went upstairs to collect Ren, my hands shaking as I helped her put on her shoes. She looked confused and a little scared. Why are we leaving early, Mommy? We haven't had dinner yet. We'll get dinner at home, sweetheart. As we walked to the car, I could hear voices through the living room window, Marcus and his family talking in hushed, urgent tones. Planning, probably. Deciding what to do about me. I strapped Ren into her car seat and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, trying to collect myself. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the injured party here, the neglected wife who deserved sympathy and understanding. Instead, I felt like a criminal. When we got home, there was an envelope on the front porch with my name on it. Inside was a business card for a law firm and a note in Marcus's careful handwriting. We need to talk. Monday, 2 p.m. My blood turned to ice as I realized what this meant. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was taking action, and I had no idea how to stop what I'd set in motion. Monday morning crawled by like torture. I'd called in sick to work again, the third day in 2 weeks, and spent the morning pacing around the house, rehearsing what I would say to Marcus at 2 p.m. I had to make him understand that this was all a misunderstanding, that we could work through this. At noon, I called Tasha, desperate to hear a friendly voice. How are you holding up? She asked, but there was something different in her tone, less warm than usual. Not great. Marcus and I are meeting this afternoon to talk things through. I'm hoping we can get past this. There was a pause. Eulalie, can I ask you something? Of course. Last week, when you told me about having your friend over, you said his name was Callum? My stomach clenched. Yes, why? I was talking to Jennifer Morrison yesterday at Emma's soccer game. She mentioned seeing a man leaving your house late Wednesday night when she was driving home from her book club. She said he seemed to be in a hurry, like he was sneaking around. Jennifer Morrison lived 3 streets over. I'd forgotten how small our neighborhood really was, how everyone noticed everything. He wasn't sneaking, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. He just... Eulalie, I need to ask you directly. Did you sleep with him? The question hung in the air like a blade. I could lie. I'd been lying so well lately, but something in Tasha's voice told me she already knew the answer. It's complicated, I whispered. Oh my God. Her voice was barely audible. Eulalie, what were you thinking? I was thinking that I'm lonely and neglected and I deserve to feel wanted for once in my life. The words tumbled out in a rush. Marcus hasn't touched me in months, Tasha. He barely looks at me. I felt invisible in my own marriage. So you had an affair? It wasn't an affair. It was one night. One stupid night when I felt sorry for myself and made a terrible decision. In your marital bed? I closed my eyes. How did you… Marcus told Judith. Judith told her sister Carol. Carol told Jennifer. Jennifer told half the soccer team. Tasha's voice was getting colder. Everyone knows, Eulalie. Everyone's talking about it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. What are they saying? What do you think they're saying? That you cheated on your husband while he was out of town working to support your family. That you brought another man into the bed you share with Marcus while your daughter was sleeping down the hall. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that. I was crying now, ugly sobs that made it hard to speak. I made a mistake, Tasha. One mistake. Doesn't that count for anything? Don't 8 years of marriage count for anything? I don't know, Eulalie. That's between you and Marcus. But I have to tell you, I'm having a hard time understanding how you could do this to him. He's a good man. He loves you. He doesn't love me. He ignores me. So you destroy your marriage instead of talking to him about it? Instead of trying counseling or… I tried. I suggested counseling months ago and he said we didn't need it. Did you tell him how unhappy you were? I opened my mouth to say yes, then realized I couldn't remember ever having that conversation. I'd complained to my friends, to my mother, to anyone who would listen. But had I ever actually sat Marcus down and told him how I was feeling? We don't really talk about feelings. So instead of learning how to communicate with your husband, you decided to communicate with your ex-boyfriend in your bedroom while naked. The harshness in her voice was like a physical blow. Tasha, please. I need my friends right now. I'm sorry, Eulalie, I really am. But I can't support this. I have to think about my own marriage, my own family. I can't be seen as condoning what you did. The line went dead. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried until I had no tears left. Then I looked at the clock and realized it was 1:45. Marcus would be here in 15 minutes. I splashed cold water on my face, changed into a conservative blouse and slacks, and tried to compose myself. I could fix this. I had to fix this. Marcus arrived at exactly 2 p.m., accompanied by a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. "This is my attorney, Sarah Mitchell," Marcus said without preamble. "I thought it would be best to have a witness for our conversation." My heart sank. "Marcus, surely we don't need lawyers for this." "I think we do." He sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where Wren did her homework every night, and placed a manila folder in front of him. Sarah Mitchell sat beside him, pulling out a legal pad. "Mrs. Finch, my client has asked me to be present while he discusses his intentions regarding your marriage." "Intentions?" I looked between them, panic rising in my chest. "What intentions?" Marcus opened the folder and spread out several photographs. My blood turned to ice as I recognized them. Pictures of Callum's car in our driveway, time stamped at 9:32 p.m. and 11:47 p.m. Pictures of our bedroom window where the glow of candles was clearly visible. A screenshot of a text message thread between Callum and me, including the message where I'd invited him over. "How did you get these?" I whispered. "Your phone backs up to our shared iCloud account," Marcus said quietly. "I've been getting copies of all your messages for months. I just never bothered to look at them until now." I felt sick. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been married to you. The account was set up when we got our phones together 3 years ago. You agreed to it." Sarah Mitchell leaned forward. "Mrs. Finch, these messages show a pattern of communication with Mr. Doyle going back several weeks. Messages that are quite explicit about your intentions." I stared at the screenshots, seeing my own words reflected back at me. Messages I'd forgotten about, late-night texts where I'd complained about Marcus, where I'd flirted with Callum, where I'd made it clear that I was available. "I want a divorce," Marcus said simply. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Marcus, no. Please, we can work through this." "Can we?" Because looking at these messages, this wasn't a moment of weakness. This was planned. "You've been talking to him for weeks, complaining about me, setting up this encounter." "That's not—" I stopped, because it was true. Every word of it was true. "I've also filed for primary custody of Ren," he continued, "based on your poor judgment in bringing a stranger into our home while she was present. He's not a stranger, and you can't take my daughter away from me. I can try, especially when the court sees evidence of your adultery and the fact that you exposed our child to it." Sarah Mitchell pulled out another document. "We're also freezing all joint assets pending the divorce proceedings. You'll need to find your own housing and your own legal representation." I stared at them in shock. "You're kicking me out of my own house?" "It's my house," Marcus said quietly. "I bought it before we were married. It's in my name only." I felt like the world was spinning around me. Everything I'd built, everything I'd counted on, was disappearing. "Marcus, please. I made a mistake. One terrible mistake. But we have 8 years together. We have Ren. We had 8 years together. You ended that when you brought another man into our bed. I can explain—" "You can explain to your lawyer." He stood up, gathering the photographs. "Sarah will be in touch with your attorney once you've retained one. Until then, you have 72 hours to pack your personal belongings and find somewhere else to stay." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know, Eulalie. Maybe you should have thought about that before you destroyed our marriage." As they walked toward the door, I called out desperately, "What about Ren? When do I get to see her?" Marcus paused in the doorway. "Supervised visits once a week until the custody hearing." "Supervised? Marcus, I'm her mother. You're also someone who exercises extremely poor judgment. I won't risk exposing her to more trauma." The door closed behind them with a soft click, and I was alone in the house that was no longer mine, staring at the ruins of the life I'd thrown away for one night of feeling desired. I called my mother, sobbing into the phone as I tried to explain what had happened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "He's just angry right now. Men always overreact to these things. Give him some time to cool down and he'll come to his senses." But even as she said it, I knew she was wrong. The Marcus who had sat at my kitchen table with his lawyer wasn't angry. He was resolved. He'd made his decision, and there was no going back. I had 72 hours to figure out how to rebuild a life I'd never expected to lose. 3 weeks later, I was living in a cramped studio apartment across town, surviving on takeout and sleeping pills. The divorce papers had been served, the custody hearing was scheduled for the following month, and my lawyer, a tired-looking man named Robert Chen, who charged $200 an hour I didn't have, kept telling me to manage my expectations. "The evidence against you is substantial," he said during our second meeting, flipping through the thick file Marcus's attorney had provided. "The photographs, the text messages, the witness statements from neighbors who saw Mr. Doyle's car in your driveway, and then there's your daughter's testimony." My heart stopped. "What testimony? She's 7 years old." The court appointed a guardian ad litem to represent Ren's interests. She's been interviewed twice. According to the gal's report, she remembers seeing a strange man in your house that night. Remembers you seeming upset and secretive afterward. She's a child. She doesn't understand what she saw. Children are often the most reliable witnesses, Mrs. Finch. They report what they observe without the filter of adult rationalization. I slumped in my chair. "What are my chances of getting joint custody?" Robert Chen removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Honestly? Not good. Your husband has documented evidence of adultery. He owns the family home outright. He has a stable income and strong family support system. You're currently unemployed. I was fired because of the rumors. My boss said I was creating a hostile work environment." living in temporary housing, and you've demonstrated what the court will likely view as a serious lapse in judgment regarding your child's welfare. I felt like I was drowning. So what do? We can try to negotiate a settlement, maybe supervised visitation evolving to overnight visits after 6 months of counseling. But Mrs. Finch, I need you to understand, your husband holds all the cards here. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment staring at my phone, scrolling through old photos of Wren, my beautiful little girl, who I was only allowed to see for 2 hours every Saturday afternoon at a family services center, with a social worker taking notes in the corner. Our last visit had been heartbreaking. Wren had been quiet and withdrawn, asking why Mommy couldn't come home, why Daddy looked so sad all the time, why everything had changed. "I miss you, Mommy," she'd whispered when I hugged her goodbye. "I miss you too, baby, more than you'll ever know." In desperation, I started calling Marcus. The first few calls went straight to voicemail, so I left messages. "Marcus, please call me back. We need to talk about this. We need to think about Wren. I know you're angry, but please don't punish our daughter for my mistakes. She needs both her parents. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. Please give me a chance to make this right." By the 10th call, he answered. "Stop calling me," he said without preamble. "Marcus, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. I listened to you for 8 years, Eulalie. I'm done listening. This is destroying Wren. She's confused and scared, and she needs her family together. She needs stability and security, things you took away from her when you decided to have your affair. It wasn't an affair. It was one night, one stupid mistake. Stop lying." His voice was sharp, angrier than I'd ever heard it. "I read the messages, Eulalie, all of them. You were planning this for weeks. You told Callum you were unhappy in your marriage, that you wished you'd never settled down, that you fantasized about being with him again." I closed my eyes, remembering those late-night texts I'd sent in moments of self-pity and wine-fueled nostalgia. Those messages were just venting. I didn't mean them. You invited him to our house the moment I left town. You bought lingerie. You planned a seduction in our marital bed while our daughter slept down the hall. And now you want me to believe it was just a mistake? I want you to believe that I love you and I love our family, and I would do anything to fix this. Then you should have thought about that before you destroyed it. The line went dead. I called back immediately, but it went to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, then again before bed. Each time, voicemail. Finally, I left one last message, tears streaming down my face as I spoke. "Marcus, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, but please don't take Wren away from me. Please don't punish her for what I did. I'll do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just please don't destroy our family completely." The next morning, I woke up to a text from Sarah Mitchell, Marcus's attorney. "Please direct all future communication through legal counsel. Any further attempts to contact my client directly will be considered harassment." That's when I knew I'd lost him completely. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in late October. I wore my most conservative suit and sat beside Robert Chen at a small table, watching Marcus and his lawyer present their case with devastating efficiency. They had everything: the photographs, the messages, statements from neighbors, the guardian ad litem's report, even a recording of one of my desperate voicemail messages where I sounded unhinged and hysterical. "Your Honor," Sarah Mitchell said, "Mr. Finch is seeking primary custody not out of vindictiveness, but out of genuine concern for his daughter's welfare. Mrs. Finch has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that culminated in bringing a strange man into the family home for sexual purposes while the child was present." "That's not what happened," I whispered to Robert Chen. "It's what the evidence shows," he whispered back. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to explain my side of the story, but every answer seemed to make things worse. "Mrs. Finch," the judge said, "you testified that you felt neglected in your marriage. Did you attempt to address these feelings with your husband through counseling or direct communication?" We don't really talk about feelings in our family. So instead of learning to communicate with your spouse, you chose to communicate with a former romantic partner? It wasn't like that. Mrs. Finch, I've reviewed the text messages between you and Mr. Doyle. They span several weeks and contain explicit complaints about your marriage and clear invitations for romantic contact. How is that not exactly like that? I had no answer. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Primary custody to Marcus, with supervised visitation for me every other weekend, pending completion of a parenting class and 6 months of counseling. The court finds that while Mrs. Finch is not an unfit mother, she has demonstrated a serious lapse in judgment that directly impacted the minor child's welfare and stability. Until she can demonstrate consistent good judgment and emotional stability, her access to the child will be limited and supervised. As the gavel fell, I saw Marcus close his eyes in relief. Across the courtroom, Judith and Becca were hugging each other, tears of joy on their faces. I had lost everything: my husband, my daughter, my home, my family. All for one night, when I'd felt sorry for myself and made the worst decision of my life. But the worst was yet to come. 6 months after the custody hearing, I thought I'd hit rock bottom. I was living in the same studio apartment, working part-time at a dental office, and seeing Ren every other weekend for supervised visits that felt more like interviews than mother-daughter time. But I was surviving. Barely, but surviving. Then Marcus remarried. I found out through social media. A mutual friend had posted photos from the wedding. Marcus in a black tuxedo, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. His bride was Rebecca Walsh, a pediatric nurse he'd met through Ren's school. She was younger than me, prettier, with kind eyes and a genuine smile as she hugged my daughter in the wedding photos. Ren was the flower girl. She looked radiant in a pale pink dress, beaming as she scattered rose petals down the aisle for her father's new beginning. I stared at those photos for hours, zooming in on every detail. The way Marcus looked at his new wife, with the adoration he'd once reserved for me. The way Ren clung to Rebecca's hand, clearly comfortable with her new stepmother. The way everyone looked so happy, so complete, so much better off without me. That's when I realized Marcus's revenge was complete. He hadn't just divorced me or taken custody of our daughter. He'd replaced me entirely, created a new family that was everything ours had never been, and he'd done it all legally, methodically, without ever raising his voice or losing his temper. I called Robert Chen, my lawyer, in a panic. Can he do this? Can he just marry someone else and have her around my daughter without my consent? Mrs. Finch, you're divorced. Your ex-husband is free to remarry whoever he chooses. And unless you can prove that his new wife poses a danger to your daughter, there's nothing you can do about it. But she's my daughter? She's his daughter too, and he has primary custody. I'm sorry, but this is the reality of your situation. I hung up and immediately called the number I'd memorized by heart, Marcus's cell phone. I knew he wouldn't answer, but I called anyway, leaving a message I knew he'd never return. Marcus, it's me. I saw the photos. I can't believe you got married without telling me, without letting me know that some stranger would be living with my daughter. We need to talk about this. An hour later, Sarah Mitchell called me back. Mrs. Finch, I've been retained to handle all communication regarding your ex-husband's remarriage. Any concerns you have about your daughter's welfare can be addressed through proper legal channels. I want to modify the custody agreement. On what grounds? On the grounds that my daughter is living with a woman I've never met, who might not be suitable. Mrs. Finch, Rebecca Walsh is a pediatric nurse with an impeccable background check and glowing references from Ren's school. She's been a positive presence in your daughter's life for months. Any attempt to challenge the custody arrangement based on your ex-husband's remarriage will be viewed as harassment. Months? How long has this been going on? That's not your concern. Your concern should be focusing on your own rehabilitation so you can eventually have unsupervised visits with your daughter. The line went dead. I sat in my tiny apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and finally understood what Marcus had done. He hadn't just punished me for my affair. He'd systematically dismantled everything I'd cared about and rebuilt it without me. The house I'd decorated was now Rebecca's home. The daughter I'd raised was now calling another woman Mommy Rebecca. The family I'd taken for granted had been replaced by a better version, one where everyone was happy and functional and whole. And it was all my fault. I thought about the night that had started it all, the wine, the candles, the silk nightgown, the moment when Callum's hands had made me feel beautiful and desired. It had seemed so important then, so necessary. I'd felt like I was dying of loneliness, like I deserved something more than Marcus's distracted affection. Now I could see it for what it really was, the most expensive few hours of my life. A brief moment of feeling special that had cost me everything that actually mattered. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Finch? This is Dr. Patricia Reeves from Wren's school. I'm calling because your daughter has requested that we remove you from her emergency contact list. My heart stopped. What? She's asked that only her father and stepmother be contacted in case of emergencies. She says she doesn't want to worry you since you live so far away now. She's 8 years old. She can't make that decision. Actually, given the custody arrangement and her father's primary guardianship, she can express her preferences. I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know about the change. Can I speak to her? I'm sorry, but she's asked not to take calls from you during school hours. She says it makes her sad, and she can't concentrate on her schoolwork. After hanging up, I drove to Marcus's house, the house that used to be our house. I parked across the street and watched through the living room window as the three of them had dinner together. Marcus was laughing at something Rebecca said, while Wren colored in a workbook. They looked like a magazine advertisement for the perfect family. I sat there for 2 hours, watching the life I'd thrown away, until a police car pulled up behind me. Ma'am, we've had reports of someone sitting in a car watching the house. Is everything all right? I looked up at the officer, a young man with kind eyes who probably thought I was some kind of stalker. It used to be my house, I said. My daughter lives there. Do you have permission to be here? I thought about the restraining order Sarah Mitchell had mentioned, the legal boundaries that now defined my relationship with my own family. No, I whispered. I don't. I'm going to need you to move along then. And ma'am, maybe don't come back here unless you have official visitation. As I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of the house in my rearview mirror. The lights were warm and golden, and I could see Marcus helping Wren with her homework while Rebecca cleaned up the dinner dishes. They looked happy, complete, better off without me. That night, I sat in my studio apartment and wrote a letter I would never send. Dear Marcus, you won. I know you never saw it as a competition, but you won completely and absolutely. You took everything that mattered to me and made it better than it ever was when I had it. I understand now what I threw away. Not just a marriage, but a family. Not just a husband, but a man who loved me enough to work 60-hour weeks so I could stay home with Wren. Not just a comfortable life, but a partnership with someone who deserved so much better than what I gave him. I see the photos of your new family, and I'm glad. I'm glad Wren has a mother figure who puts her first. I'm glad you found someone who appreciates what an incredible man you are. I'm glad you're happy. I destroyed the most precious thing in my life for a few hours of feeling desired by someone who disappeared the moment things got complicated. I traded a lifetime of love for one night of attention. You never had to say a word against me. You never had to fight dirty or play games. You just let the truth speak for itself, and the truth was devastating enough. I hope someday Ren will understand that losing her was the worst punishment I could ever receive, worse than any revenge you could have planned. I hope she knows that I think about her every day, and that my biggest regret isn't losing you, it's failing her. You gave me everything a woman could want, and I threw it all away because I was too selfish and stupid to recognize what I had. I'm sorry, Marcus, for all of it. But mostly I'm sorry that sorry isn't enough to undo what I did. Eulalie. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer with all the others I'd written but never sent. Then I looked around my tiny apartment, at the second-hand furniture and the photos of Ren I was no longer allowed to take, at the life I'd built from the ashes of the one I'd destroyed, and finally accepted what Marcus had known from the beginning. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. Some damage can't be undone. Some prices are too high to ever finish paying. I'd learned that the hard way, and Marcus had made sure I'd never forget it. His revenge wasn't dramatic or cruel. It was simply letting me live with the consequences of my choices while he built something better from the ruins I'd left behind. And that was the most devastating punishment of all. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.